Welcome back to Navigate New York. I'm so excited to introduce season 5, and this season is just filled with incredible guests that I'm so grateful that I get to sit down and interview. I'm also so grateful to be sponsored this season by Amvoy Wealth. Amvoy Wealth is a cross-border financial firm who specialise in assisting Irish individuals moving to, living in, or returning from the United States. So Amvoy Wealth are uniquely positioned to help you if you have financial interests in both Ireland and the US. You can find out more at amvoywealth.com. I'll leave their link in the show notes, and I'm so delighted to be partnering with Amvoy Wealth for season 5 of Navigate New York. Welcome back to Navigate New York. I'm so delighted to have two amazing women as my guests today. I have with me Gemma Aisling and Aisling Marron, and two women I admire greatly. I know Gemma a little better than I know Aisling, but I feel when there's a vibe, Aisling. So there's a number of reasons I wanted to get you both on the podcast, just because you both have really interesting stories and lives in New York, but mostly selfishly because I want to know what it's like to be a mum in New York. And a few followers and people who listen to the podcast have said it would be great to do an episode around motherhood amongst everything else that goes on in New York. So you're both mums in New York, Irish mums in New York. So I'm super excited for our chat. And I'd like to start by just asking you both to introduce yourselves.
Sure, I'll go first. I'm Gemma Aisling. I'm from Cork City, like really Cork City. It kind of depends who I'm talking to. Sometimes I'm from Blackrock in Cork and sometimes I'm from Mahon.
Is like Blackrock posh?
Yeah, Blackrock could be poshish. Well, it is now actually. Yeah. It wasn't when, my father was a child there. But anyway, it's kind of like the Castleknock, Blanchardstown thing, you know what I mean? Yeah. When you're trying to be kind of fancy, you say, I'm from Blackrock. Yeah.
I always say I'm from Restrever. I'm no more from Restrever. That's where Mary McAleese is from. Oh, really? I live beside Mary McAleese.
But Leo, my husband likes to remind me regularly that I'm actually from Mahon. But anyway, I've been in New York for nearly 10 years. Mm-hmm. I'm from a big family. I'm the youngest of 5. I had a very, very typical Irish working class upbringing. We went on holidays to a town 6 miles from where we grew up, etc. Mm-hmm. So definitely
that's a court thing.
Yeah.
You don't want to live court.
Exactly. You know what? You're probably right. My mother hadn't my mother literally hated leaving the county bounds. But no, I don't think we would have had the money either. My dad was one of 15 children, 13 survived childhood, I guess. And my mom was one of, God, I think it's wrong. Am I 7 or 6? Oh my gosh, I'll be murdered for this. I need to think. Anyway, big family, lots of cousins. Mm-hmm. Went to a very, actually a Desh school in Cork City.
What does Desh school mean?
You know what? I actually only learned I went to a Desh school as well, in my adult life, which is probably a good thing. But it kind of means it's based on socioeconomic, means of the average, I guess, student at the school. So Desh schools in Ireland are schools that I guess are kind of more in the kind of lower range. I think I don't even know what the percentiles are. It just means less advantage. Right. But apparently now it's a really good thing because they get a lot of extra, supports and funding and everything. But they didn't when I went there. I don't think I could unfortunately say. And then I was an Access student. I qualified for the Access program, which brought me to UL. The Access program is also a program for people from a particular means-tested background who have strong academic ability, and went to UL, which is that was probably the best, in some respects, the best 4 years of my life. Yeah. Loved my time at UL. And then went to Dublin, did a master's in Smurfit School, which is again great, and started working at Microsoft, where I met my now husband. Moved to the US in late 2014, early 2015, and I was living the New York dream really for a couple of years until I got up the duff. Yeah. And we were going out every Friday, Saturday night, lying in bed till 2:00 on the weekends. It was the dream of dreams. I only realise now how little I appreciated that now that I have 2 little kids. Had my first baby in 2017, in July 2017. She's about to turn 7 at the end of this month. Wow. Esme. And then had my second baby in 2019, in November 2019. So I have 2 little girls. It's interesting, you really don't think much about your own. Well, I hadn't ever thought much about my own childhood and my own mum and my own dad and my own parents and all that kind of thing until, and just even, you know, my relative kind of like childhood or, you know, experiences until I had kids of my own, you know, and especially in this like climate. I know I'm going to talk about this, but like there's definitely like such thing as like crazy. Like parents are really interested in their kids these days.
Yeah. You know? Like we weren't, our parents weren't that interested in us.
No.
Yeah.
Especially when you're like, I love my parents dearly, especially the youngest of such a big family too,
yes.
you know.
And what do you do now?
Right now I work for a law firm, Mason Hayes Curran, here in New York. I also write for Forbes and for NASDAQ on women and, you know, kind of the patriarchy. I kind of try and piss on the patriarchy with the pen.
Love it. Love it. I'm great with alliteration too.
Yeah, and I just try and like survive every day, basically, is what I do now.
What an amazing introduction, Gemma. Honestly, and I should say I have a Navigate New York episode with you from 2 seasons ago, which is an amazing listen and goes a little deeper into having your second daughter, Edie, and so would definitely recommend to listen to that podcast. And I really, that was one of my first introductions to you properly, and it was really moving. And I think it started my interest, piqued my interest in like, you know, I've been here almost 10 years. Oh no, I have been here 10 years. And the prospect of having a family is real and hopeful and, you know, not immediately, but from having friends who have families here and have careers or have had to change their career or had to change their life, it's made me way more like aware of what I need to be aware of. So I'm super excited to kind of like get into all the motherhood questions. So Aisling, will you do the same thing please and give us your intro?
So my name's Aisling Marron and I'm from Meath. Grew up in Trim County Meath. Typical rural upbringing of the 80s and 90s. Like lived in a bungalow 2 miles outside the town, fields on 4 sides of the house. My husband's from Roscommon, and when we first met before he came down, he was always like, oh, Trim, like that's really the commuter belt, like you're really a dub. And I was like, no, I'm really not, you know, it's quite rural, it's quite small. And he was like, oh yeah, but inside the pale, like you're a dub. I'm from the country and you're a dub. And then the first time he came down, it was the weekend of the Trim Haymaking Festival. And there was like a field of people singing country songs in the back of trucks, and
love it.
There was a roll in the hay competition that was meant to be for couples, but the winners that year were a brother and sister, so he was like, okay, I
says a lot.
Believed you.
Yeah. How far is Trim from Dublin, like driving?
40 kilometres.
Okay.
Yeah. It is close.
Yeah. But a different world.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So yeah, I was the eldest of 4. Went to school in Trim and then went to college at 18. I moved to Dublin and studied law in Trinity. Had a great 4 years there, and kind of lived in Dublin ever since. Like I did summers away. I did Erasmus in France. I travelled a bit after college, and I lived in Brussels for a time and Australia for a time. But I'd say I mostly, like I loved Dublin, and people would disown me now for saying this, but I would consider it home. And when people ask me where I'm from, like I say Dublin partly because they won't know anywhere else, but also because like Dublin was my home for the last 20 years before we moved here. So I studied law and then trained to be a solicitor. That's where I met my husband David. We were both studying in Blackhall Place at the time. Which I think when you say that, people kind of picture you like eyes locking over a library book in a dusty Blackhall Place library. But the reality is it was like at 4 a.m. at the end of a night out.
Coppers?
Not coppers, no. David changed the story to say that, but I'm going to deny it was coppers. So yeah, we met on like the street piling out of a nightclub at the end of a night, and what anyone would do when they want to prolong the night is go get a full sit-down Indian meal, because that was the only place you could buy wine at 4 a.m. at South Richmond Street.
I love that.
Yeah. So we met there, and we both qualified at the same time. So we're both solicitors, followed the usual timeline, moved in together, bought a car, got engaged, bought a house, got married, went on honeymoon, had a baby, had another baby.
Oh my God.
We're in New York 2 years now, and
it feels like you've been here longer.
I know, it's funny, isn't it?
Yeah. I think that's 2 years.
Yeah.
Time moves in a strange way here. Yeah. Sometimes you think you're just settling in or you've just arrived, and then you're like, I can't imagine that I would used to live here.
Yeah.
But it kind of came out of the blue. We were literally I was expecting our second kid. We were both working from home. I was in the spare room and David was working in a room at the bottom of our garden. And he came in
Called
one
the
day.
shed.
Yeah, the shed, yeah.
A man shed.
Yeah, he came in and I was like working away. Barely turned around. He's like, oh, I just had my review. And I was like, oh yeah, very good. How did it go? Didn't turn my head. And he's like, yeah, I kind of ran out of things to say actually. And I just said for something to say that I'd be interested in moving to the New York office. And I was like, oh yeah, still not really paying attention. He's like, and they said, go for it. And I was like, what?
Oh my God. And you're pregnant at this point.
Yeah.
Wow.
I was like, this is our life now. We live in Dublin. So we've kind of moved to New York because Dave Cutton hadn't prepared for his work review.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
And did you feel like it was like, were you excited by the idea? Or were you like...
I was completely taken aback.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess if it was like 10 years ago, I would have been like delighted. My mind hadn't caught up to the idea.
Yeah.
I was like, but we bought a house.
Yeah.
And we've 2 kids and we're settled now. This is us, we're settled. But I mean, like, we didn't have to go at that point.
Yeah.
We could have said no, but we discussed it and decided to go. And so that was like February 21, but the country was still closed.
Mm-hmm.
I think it opened last September. So we started the process then and got our visa in 22 and moved over September 22.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I didn't realise that's how it all came about.
Yeah.
And it was quite a shock decision.
Yeah.
And I love hearing when people, like, as much as it was brilliant for me to move over here as a 22-year-old, you know, it's a totally different experience when you come over here as an actual adult who, you know, maybe you obviously have more means and can like live a little better, but also still so terrifying because all the things, you know, especially having kids are in Ireland.
Yeah.
How was that transition?
So like there was pros and cons. We were definitely naive in that we were like, the kids were 3 and 18 months and we were like, this is a perfect time to move continent. We'll go for a few years and then they'll come back and start school. Like they won't even notice anything's happened. Yeah. And then we arrived here and we're like, oh, we have a 3-year-old and an 18-month-old. It is very different city to live in than like, it's just very limiting and you don't have as much free time. And like we were looking at like the 20-year-olds out every night and we were like, what have we done? Yeah. We've just moved our nights across another continent. No, like once you're settled in, like there's so much opportunities and fun. And I think it's like, maybe we wouldn't have done that in Dublin. Yeah. And we do here.
Yeah. I wonder, has it brought you closer as like in your relationship with your husband as well? Because you've had to really like I find New York is quite, you know, isolating in the fact that you're in a smaller space. You don't have your family around you like to kind of bounce off or go and see all the time. And, you know, I feel like, you know, like for me and Brian, we met similar-ish story where we met at 4 a.m. but in an Irish bar on McLean Avenue. And well, exactly. I didn't understand a word he said and I was like, I love Galway. And like essentially I always say we kind of just became roommates and like we were just in such an enclosed space for such a long time that we were like, yeah, we can make this work. Yeah. But
definitely like we found when we moved over we'd so much free time because we didn't know anybody. We had no prior engagements. The kids weren't in any classes. We were like, oh, we have a lot of free time actually. Yeah.
Oh, well, it's interesting to like compare stories because Gemma, you had your girls here, and what are, you know, do you ever think about? I'm sure it's hard not to kind of like compare what life would be like, if you had the girls at home and you lived at home in terms of like the ease of childbirth and also raising your children. Like, do you ever think about that? Like, is it particularly difficult in New York?
I mean, I don't know if it's... I don't know. I think childbirth is an absolute nightmare anywhere. Yeah. That's just a form of hell that, you know... Yeah.
Tell us more.
Yeah. But, you know, I don't know. Like, sometimes when I go home, like, I definitely feel like I am one of those immigrants whose, like, heart is in 2 places. Yeah. You know, for me, 100%, like, right now I can't travel to Ireland, actually, because I'm waiting on my visa for the last, you know, God knows how long. But, I love going home and I almost need to go home to recenter myself a little bit. Yeah. And when I am home, I am definitely envious of how easy it is to like just leave the kids with your sister or your cousin and even go to like Super Value. Like that feels like I love that so much.
Yeah.
I love,
it's
like,
a real home comfort.
Walk around Super Value on my own.
But
basically when you have kids, your life becomes so small and limited that things that were like
mundane
previously are suddenly like spa days, like a walk around Trader Joe's by yourself.
It's like
such
heaven. It's ridiculous. I also, when I see my cousins and my nieces and nephews and everything on Instagram, or you know, in camogie jerseys and hurling jerseys and all that, and like doing all the things that we did when we were kids, then I get like also a sense of, oh no, you know, am I kind of depriving my own kids of this? Like, you know, I kind of worry about that, because I grew up with the community around me of like, you know, obviously my mum and dad, my older siblings, but also my neighbours and my aunts and uncles who were like, I truly had, because some of them have got the best aunts and uncles and cousins in the world. Like they were just such, I have come from, I would say that's like my, you know, that was my great gift in life, I suppose, really. You know, I wouldn't say we had much money, but we had like lots of like love around us. Yeah. And I kind of sometimes worry about that for my kids. Yeah. You know, like my daughter asked me one time, Mama, you know, when you were a little girl, did you have any grown-ups who minded you? And I was like, oh my God. Yeah. She doesn't even understand like the family structure that I had parents once, you know. Yeah. And that really like was like, oh Jesus Christ. Yeah. You know, so you have these moments where you're thinking, is this the right thing or not? You know, I always tell people like, I'm here in the US because I have become a capitalist, and I want to, as much as I should be ashamed saying that, and I think my 19-year-old self would like, who read Naomi Klein religiously and stuff, would climb under the table, but I'm here because I want to like have more financial opportunity, and I suppose create more for myself and my kids than I had. And you know, that's really at the crux of why we made the decision to stay here, to come here and then to stay here. You know, but I wouldn't say that I'm doing it because I think this is a better society to raise children in. And I'm honest about that. I even sometimes say that to like some of my American friends and stuff, you know. I think there's a lot of advantages to Irish society. I also think the weather is another reason why it often feels hard to imagine giving this up, especially with kids. Because having the reliability of weather with children just makes your life so much easier to like plan things, you know. But I think there's like definitely pros and cons for both. And nothing drives me more crazy, I don't know about you, than these like Irish immigrants who like shit on Ireland. You know, and like they really drive me mad. Because like, you know, I just think there's so much good things about life at home. And the people especially, and the values like you grew up with, you know. Kids here like are in that rat race from the age of 5.
It's crazy.
And no matter how younger, and no matter how hard you try and hope that, you know, whatever values and thoughts you're instilling in their head are working, it's a real challenge, because people are like, you know, you are kind of born to be compared or something in the US, you know.
So when you say rat race, like kids are in that rat race, what does that mean, Aisling?
So I think it's like modern parenting maybe generally, and it's just like even more intense in New York. Like somebody told me before I moved here, and I was a little bit nervous about it, one of my friends that already lives here, she said, no, I think you'll really love it because it's full of type A personalities. And this really gave me pause, because I don't like type A personalities. They're very intense and nervy to be around. But it is full of type A personalities. And you know, some of the best advice I got was for like life in New York and having kids in New York is you have to just like take a deep breath, remember, like think of like what's important to you, and like just block out the noise and the nonsense. So the rat race is like, I moved over, the kids were 3 and 18 months, and I remember I was at a party one night, and I was talking to this woman. She was in her 60s and her kids were in their 20s and 30s. And she said she'd heard the age my kids were, and she said, where are they going to go to school? Like, there's just the obsession with school. And then she immediately like copped herself and was like, oh, I'm really sorry, like we're so obsessed with school, I shouldn't have asked. And you know, we have thankfully we have neighbours in our Tuscan villa, and they were always saying to us, you Americans are too obsessed with school. And she was like, you know, it was great, they kept us grounded. And I was
my God.
But thank God for the neighbours in the Tuscan villa to keep you grounded.
Oh my God.
But like the chatter about school, it's just everywhere. There's so many types. The process is quite complicated, even though it's very fair and democratic. But like there's like education consultants. I saw somebody in one of the Facebook groups advertise their service as education consultant. I thought this was like a rare thing, but it's like so common.
Yeah.
Like
So people get paid to tell you where to put your kids to school.
Yeah, so they like, I actually don't know what they do. I presume they tell you what type of school is best for your kid, and they would say like what preschools are feeders for Ivy Leagues.
Oh,
and
my
you're
God.
Like, they're 3 years old.
Wow.
It's a feeder because you have money and money will get you in.
I know.
Wow. That feels so intimidating, you know, as someone, like, obviously you're both like intellects and educated, and you're both passionate about, like, you know, that, and you want your kids to have a good education, but like it feels, I do enjoy the thought of, in Ireland it's so much easier, and you know, you go to the local school, and even that's kind of becoming an issue in Ireland because of like amalgamated schools. And I know, like, locally at home where I'm from, people are like, oh my God, they're going to be shutting down this school, it's going to, like, it's on such a small scale compared to what it's like here. And then like, and it brings me to a topic I can't wait to delve into with you both, which is, you know, Irish parenting and what you're used to as an Irish parent in Ireland and an Irish person in the US parent. Irish parenting versus American parenting, because Gemma, you said something to me recently that really struck a chord, was that, like, do you want to be Irish parents in America with your values? And that sounds like, yeah, of course you do. But are you also then limiting or like pulling back your kids? Not to say we're like that as a culture, but like you're kind of confusing them because they're engrossed in this American classroom with all of their sports and all of these celebrations and parties and, you know, graduations every year. Do you struggle as individuals to accept that for your kids? And do you try to like influence by what you know and have been brought up with? And what's the right thing to do?
Yeah. I think you can't help but do like what you were brought up with. And I would like them to have like maybe an Irish style of parenting, but I would see it as like a positive for them.
Yeah.
Like living in America and then like just having a more grounding.
Yeah.
Like I didn't have any philosophy in mind before I had kids. And I remember when we joined here and joined the preschool and we had to fill in the form, they said, what's your parenting philosophy? And I thought, oh God, I don't know. I just made something up.
So what did you say?
I can't remember. And I'll tell you why I know I can't remember, because then for the second kid, it didn't copy it across and I'd already submitted it. And I was like, I can't remember what I said. Now I have to make it up again. And everything crashed. So I did it 4 times. And I was like, I don't know what I wrote each time. And sometimes I think like my parenting philosophy, like I'm doing what my parents did.
Yeah.
And their upbringing is the same as mine. And then I look at like I said, I grew up in the countryside in Ireland and they're growing up in Manhattan.
Yeah.
But I feel like
it's
the
so
surroundings
cool,
are different, but I feel like the crack in the house is the same.
Yes.
And it's just the same atmosphere and attitude.
Love that.
Yeah.
That's really refreshing to hear. What do you think, Jen?
I think I think it's when you have an Irish husband.
Yes.
You know, that makes it a lot easier in a lot of ways to just naturally have this organic kind of Irish style, you know. Like Leo always, like, we joke about some of the lines that we used in us as kids. Like, for example, if one of the kids is crying, like, I'll give you something to cry about.
Yeah.
You know, like lines like that.
Yeah.
Or, you know, threatening them with orphanages and stuff. So, like, there's definitely a fine line. But, you know, I think because we're both Irish, it's very difficult for us sometimes to not kind of roll our eyes a little bit at the, you know, Americanization, or I don't even know if it's an Americanization thing, because I think it's probably happening across the world, really.
Yeah.
But, you know, this kind of new form of parenting. But I suppose in terms of like being, you know, or keeping your kids in the same like playing field, I think that's challenging, right? But because you said like they're asking it's a democratic process for schooling, and like I've really started to think it isn't actually. I think it's a very elitist process, and that's, you know, you have to kind of like
the public school.
Yeah.
Because of the areas.
And the way that like people, you know, so people are obsessed with, they're obsessed with school ratings, and obviously this kind of feeder schools and all that kind of stuff for private schooling. That's a big kind of, it's almost a sport actually for some,
wow.
Which is why education consultants are, I suppose, so in high demand. But you know, the thing is, if you're zoned for a craft school and you don't send your kids to that school because you believe it's a craft school and you're middle class, then that school is only ever going to be as good as the parents and the community that supports the school. because PTAs like and all these other, you know, voluntary type of movements run public schools, right? So then you're kind of part of that kind of segregation, if you like, and that, like, you know, feels like really wrong. And like even for us, we were zoned for a school that, like, you know, wasn't a well regarded school. And
but what does that, like, I find
so
they get these reps, what does that mean? Like, our local school people are just so hesitant about, but nobody will ever spit out what it is.
So that's the thing, because I suppose it is a form of like prejudice, right? Or you know, but it was a really, I was thinking to myself, how the hell am I somebody who, you know, grew up in a very like working class, you know, neighborhood and went to like, you know, a very, very working class, you know, school, and then was an AXA student, and now I'm like, oh crap, should I not send you there because it's going, you know, I'm like, how have I become this, you know, like, and that was a big moment for me. I was like, Jesus Christ, like you just get sucked into it a little bit, which is really difficult, because you're like, you want your kids to have the best chance, but then you also want to be part of like a betterment, you know, and like live the values and the opportunities that you had, because I truly think, like, from an Irish perspective, the best thing we've ever had in Ireland is free education. Like, I really do think it like transformed the country, and the US is like, it feels like it's light years away from that, you know. So that side of it's kind of hard, you know. And then you send your kids to these like nice schools, and people are, you know, doing $50 gymnastics classes and all of these things that, you know, are really expensive and difficult to keep up with, but your kids want to do them too, or, you know, and then you're just kind of sucked into it a little bit, which is difficult. Like, it's definitely, it weighs on my mind a lot.
But I do think as well, because you both are rural and I'm rural, like, I notice in my eldest brother and his wife live really close to Belfast, and their kids, I feel like when I hear their schedule, I'm like, oh my God, it's so American. Like, they're doing gymnastics, they're doing all the after school activities. Like, both of my brother and my sister-in-law work until 6 p.m. So I know there is, like, I feel like a lot of times when we're in New York and we're in this bubble, we feel like everything's so New York. But I think you're right, what you've said. It's kind
modern
of like
life.
It's modern life and modern parenting. But obviously there is this kind of very type A American parent, and that sort of competitive nature that you can see even without kids, you know, even from babysitting over the years. I was like, this is insane how, like, and it does scare me though, because like you said, Gemma, is some of the greatest people I know are Irish people who came from nothing and had a really hard, it doesn't matter what your means are, but like had, you know, weren't in the best school or the grammar school, or they fought to kind of get to where they are today. And then you're wondering, is, you know, padding your children and like kind of making sure they have the best gonna benefit them in the long term? Like, I'm sure that's the part of the dialogue that goes on in your head. And would you mind, Aisling, just explaining what the school system is here? Like, because I was always really confused about what's a public school, what's a private school, like kindergarten. How does it like work in terms of like levels? If even just like a general summary for people who don't have
Gemma
kids.
Could help me out more, because my daughter's just starting kindergarten now, and maybe I should have got an education consultant, because I'm not sure I really understood the process.
Is playgroup, like what we would call
junior infants.
No, kindergarten is
the start of
it's
like
school.
formal education.
Okay,
like they have to go to it,
right?
Yeah. So in New York State, like, so up until just very recently, they actually introduced kind of like a similar program like what we have at home, you know, the ECC, I think it's called at home, where your kids get a certain amount of like free hours. For 3 and 4. So like play school, or we used to call it nursery school.
Yeah.
You know, you go
in the north we call it play school, and you guys call it nursery, or what's the other one before you go into your
Montessori?
Yeah, Montessori.
Yeah. We used to play at the mall and stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it's a lot fancier now. But so that's
you get free hours.
But like even in my neighborhood, for example, I sent my kids to the free programs, and the threes program, I live in Williamsburg and Brooklyn, which has become like super bougie, and there's actually a very low level of take up.
Okay.
So low in fact that Republicans are saying we shouldn't be doing this. This is just proof and point that we don't need childcare. You know, free childcare, you know.
There's a low level of kids going to these free...
Because they're, for threes and for pre-K, because a lot of people still choose to keep their kids in a paid program.
All right.
You know, at the age of 3 and 4.
Okay.
And then once you get into the kind of what would be then primary school in Ireland, which is the, you know, standard elementary school system, there's a lottery system, which is a DOE ran, which is what my kids are in, like a public system where you're zoned for a school in your neighbourhood. And like I said, sometimes people really don't want to send their kids to the zone school because it's like a, you know, kind of a chicken and egg conundrum around the investment that's been there in the past. And instead, they try and get zoned for other schools, which are like, you know, public schools that have a lot more, you know, kind of, I suppose, of a bougie kind of like well-off, you know, typical kind of entrant point. So that becomes, so then people are like, there's a lotto, and you're trying to basically get into schools outside of your zone or your district.
And can you pay for them to get into those schools?
No, you can't pay your way in, but like, I mean, I've definitely questioned over the years.
You could move house. I think people do that quite
people
commonly.
Get Airbnbs.
Wow. Streets.
And people get Airbnbs for a period of time just so they have the address while you're putting the application through.
Oh my God.
But there definitely are kind of patterns that make you wonder about the lotto. Per se, I'm saying that in inverted commas. And then you can send your kids to private school, which a lot of people do. And the private school fees here in New York are anything, I believe, from like 40 to like 75k.
A year.
So like, and I'm talking like that's for one kid. I'm in kindergarten.
40.
Yeah, like.
So just FYI to listeners, that's like more than what minimum wage is here.
It's insane. But like, again, I'm probably going to insult a lot of listeners here, but like that's, you're paying to have your kids learn the alphabet, and you know what I mean. In
it's
kindergarten,
very true.
like, you know, it's kind of, you know, they're not doing like any sort of like brain cancer research or anything, you know. Like it's
that's what, like, staying outside of like the chatter and the pressure. Like, there was just so much information around the application process. Like, the website set up, and they've like the stats they have on every school.
Wow. How did you choose for yours?
Well, we're going to sound very disinterested, but we are. We were like, the zone school is fine.
I love the website, right? I'm sure it is a great school.
But she's the only one from our preschool going to it. Like, there is a, like, everyone's sort of like, oh, that's not one of the better ones. They all want to get into the other one, but like, we're like, it's our zone school, it's our local school. We toured it, we liked it, and they're
learning their ABCs.
Like we're happy with it. Like, at times I was like, are we disinterested? And it's like, no, we're not. Like, we know she'll be fine. Like, more than fine. Yeah. You know, she's got 2 interested parents and she's going to school. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Of course she'll be fine.
Yeah.
You know, like, I mean, I think the DOE system, like, it's standard curriculum as well, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a bit mad. And people do kind of as well, you know, these private school communities, then again, I'm not part of one, but they strike me as quite insular too. You know, people like who go to these private school communities, I guess a lot of them even might have known each other, you know, from different networks and things like that. And they kind of tend to like maybe send their kids to the same summer camps and, you know, have homes in the same parts, like summer homes, and, you know, it's kind of a community in and of itself, right? So, you know, I'm sure it's probably difficult too I don't actually know what the scholarship program is like for elementary school for these programs, but I'd imagine I don't know, I've never actually looked into it. I'd imagine it'd be difficult enough, like, if you were kind of an outsider, you know, to you know, just break into it. Well, maybe it wouldn't, but to break into it a bit, because it's definitely, you know, a lot of New Yorkers, for example, send their kids to schools that they went to, and
they have that kind of alma mater vibe,
and that kind of sense of, you know, I often think about it, like, if I could afford it, would I do it? And I can't. I wish I could say absolutely one way or the other, but I actually don't know. Like, if I was a multimillionaire or whatever you'd need to be, would I do it? I don't actually know.
To go to a private school.
I just like, maybe not for kindergarten, but
the next, like, high school.
No, I don't know. I actually know very little about middle school and high school. They seem to be even more of a you know, head melt.
Well, we do. Like, I think this is really helpful to even know the first steps in terms of those things to be aware of, and the lotto and the zones and stuff like that. And you did both mention there about other parents and kind of either the outside influence, and I think what is interesting to me, because I've friends from Ireland who live in all different parts of the city and have either have become new mums and or have moved to New York with kids. What is it like? What does community mean to you, and how do you create it? I will say, because Gemma, obviously I've known you for longer, I think what you were describing about your upbringing at home, you've really tried to replicate that here. And like even just your apartment building in Williamsburg, like it's very like open door policy. You've got a lot of, and I hope I'm not like judge, or like this is not, like I think your kids are at an age now where it might be slightly easier to be social, because you kind of they can run off and do things with other friends. But when you have babies, I'm sure it's like, where can I get a minute to actually try and make friends or find friends with who are mothers? So what does that look like for you both?
Well, if there was anybody moving to New York with a baby, there's a really good group on Instagram called Mums in NYC, and it's run by this woman called Christina Allen. Is that her surname? I don't know her name. Christina. And if you go to that Instagram page, in the link, there's a WhatsApp group. So you can join the WhatsApp group, and then there's loads of subcategories like by area. There's like Brooklyn one, Manhattan, different sections, every single part of New York. And Christina organises events like 3, 4, 5 a week, and you can just go to as many or as little as you want. So that's how I made friends in the city.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I don't even know how I stumbled on it, but I found it on Instagram. And yeah, like I've made friends because everybody's a blown in New York almost, but these are like people that have come from very similar background to you. They've all moved.
Yeah.
Trying to navigate with a baby without the typical village you'd have at home. And like I've made friends at like an outing in the Museum of Modern Art with their babies, or like the Central Park Zoo, and even you get to see some of the city. And I would really recommend that. For someone. I've met a lot of people through that.
I want to go into that group when I don't have a baby. That's like really nice to have like kind of social thing.
Sophie with the doll.
Yeah. And that's great to know, because I feel like it's obvious to say it's isolating to have a baby and be on your own. And even if you have loads of friends, like I'm a friend who has friends who have babies, and I want to show up for them more, and it's just really hard with the pace in which we all work here and the pace in which they have, the limited maternity time they have, or it's so I'd love to also talk about that. And Gemma, maybe you want to chat a little bit about the community piece and maybe trying to navigate that as well, and not getting caught up in the chatter around school, and how you maybe it's with Leo that you're able to kind of be like, okay, that's just, we're not getting involved in that, or do you consciously? And then the other part B of that question is what was the part B? Sorry, you can answer that question first.
First of all, on the school thing, I think sometimes decisions are made for you, right? So it's like what's within your means and what's not, and that just wouldn't be within our means. That's why I said even if I had the money, I don't know what I'd do. Yeah. Because public school was always the option for us. Yeah. And then I suppose you do kind of have to find your tribe. Yeah. I think that takes a while too as a mom, because you don't want to. It's like dating or something sometimes. Yeah, you need to kind of like, it's kind of difficult, right? And as well, it's really hard because I think motherhood,
when I met Gemma, I was like, can I be in your tribe?
I love it. That's why I feel like you've been here for longer than 2 years. I feel like Gemma's been talking about you forever.
The last one just cracks me up. Like, this woman is hysterical.
We're trying to get you to do stand-up with all that spare time you have with the 2 kids.
But you have to, and I think when people become mothers and you're first, especially in that 6 months where you're on maternity leave, you're exhausted, your nipples are bleeding, you're like just all over the place, and then you're trying to go to these groups and have people want to be your friend. Like, it's just a terrible it's a terrible mix, It's like when you come out of a breakup and you go back out dating the next day. And you're an absolute mess of women,
Yeah. I used to be really triggered as well by people that like had their shit together. Some of I thought I'd be getting up early when I had kids, but when you have a newborn, they kind of sleep in the morning and you're only getting going by about midday, and all the events would be at 10 a.m. and then I'd, finally get myself out with a 4-month-old, and there'd be someone there with a 6-week-old with their hair done. I'm like, No, we're not going to hit it off. I can't.
Yeah. It's good, refreshing to hear that, actually. It is.
Oh,
it
God,
is.
yeah.
I see so many, like, mums in Manhattan, like, with their Lululemon leggings and their, like, amazing looking stroller. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, how have they done that?
Maybe, I don't know. I think night
They've
nannies.
paid help. No, exactly. Night nannies. And that's something I'd also love to chat about tonight. But keep chatting anyway about your...
So you kind of just, like, I suppose, find people that you connect with.
Yeah.
And then you, like anything, you end up just like going for coffees one-to-one and stuff.
Yeah.
I met a lot of my mom friends when I had my first baby, because it was 2017 and it was the summer, and you know, there were different baby groups. Like I went to a baby massage group, which now I also realise how that, you know, you're not really massaging a baby, like, you know, this is ridiculous. But you're doing it for the socialization. So you're basically just paying.
Yeah.
I had one incident one time where we went on a date when our baby was like really young, and we got in an argument, and we came back and he went to bed in a huff, and then I asked the babysitter if she should have a drink with me. And she was like, sure. But then the next day she's like, by the way, like, you owe me.
Oh my God.
We're not friends. That was counselling.
Here's my invoice. I was like, oh my God, that's a low point.
Oh my God. Not at all.
I literally just paid someone to talk to me.
Yeah.
Like, you know. So you go for the socialization, and then you kind of, I guess, make pals, and then you know, I do think it's easier in some respects to make friends in New York if you moved here with kids, because your kids go to, you know, soccer and different, or whatever it might be, dancing or whatever, and you meet people at that too. Yeah. And I don't know, I think as like now that I have a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old, I have a much quicker sense of like if I connect with another parent, you can just tell very fast. You know? Whereas at the start I didn't really know what I like. There was a lot of parents I aspired to be like, but I just realised now I won't ever be like them.
Yeah.
So that's, you know. That's kind of like aspiring to be Warren Buffett or something. Like
yeah.
You know, I'm not going to be one of those super positive enforcement type parents, you know? Like
that can be very toxic, I'm sure, to be around as well.
Yeah, well, it just makes you feel like a terrible person sometimes. Yeah. But yeah, so I think that's, you know, it's like anything. You kind of have to navigate
Navigate New York. Love it.
Yeah. I think in New York, like, not just Irish people, it's a city of blow-ins from all around the States, all around different countries. So I think a lot of people don't have the village that you have at home. And I definitely like took for granted the village I did have around me living in Dublin. Like, it was only when I got here I was like, God, my parents really did help out a lot. And they lived half an hour away. I could call them and they'd be there in an hour if I really needed them. So a lot of people are outsourcing. So you're kind of like, you're outsourcing all the help. Yeah. I definitely have connected with Irish people the most here. Yeah. And in terms of our babysitters, so we now do have like a good book of babysitters, and we just love the Irish babysitters. Like, we just find they are like, we just have a GA mafia, and like, I love that. They're all on the same football team, and if one can't come, she's like, I can't come, but this girl can. Yeah. Her name's Jenny. And we're like, all right, fine. Send her in. Like, Jenny from Waterford. I'm like, that's all we know about her. But she'll be fine. And then she comes in, and like, Irish people have just so much cop on. Yeah. Like, I just have this stream of 24-year-old Irish girls coming in, and I trust them. I love because I know their name and their county.
It's so funny because Lydia, who's my agent for auctioneering in Tribeca, she was in need of a babysitter, like more kind of full-time, and then also for the evenings. And I introduced her to an amazing young Irish woman who was looking for babysitting work, and if she can't do it, she'll have another friend come over like that. And Lydia was like, I'm obsessed with your little Irish mafia of amazing women who can care for my kids and bring them out and have the best time. And they've become like part of, like, Leah's become part of her family. And she was like, you know what I think it is? Like, you Irish people, like, come from such big families that you're such normal, like, or your parents came from big families, that you're such natural nurturers and you know how to be around kids. And she's like, that's what I find is different from having, no offense, like American babysitters that maybe didn't have a younger sibling, or you know. So is that something that, like, is you just have an automatic trust maybe, or familiarity? I'm sure that they have a bit of wit.
Yeah, I mean, I've had permanent nannies, so I like one in particular who's like actually family to us, and she's from Grenada. And she's like just the best woman ever. Yeah. But you know, like she's basically raised the kids, to be totally honest. But people are like, how do you do it? I'm like, I don't. I pay someone to raise my children.
Yeah.
Like so. But she's great, and I've had this year we've also had a nanny who doesn't speak, who's from Mexico and was kind of learning English. She came here to kind of like get better her English. Her daughter is based here, so that was a really interesting experience too. Because like you'd get on really, really well if you could have a more deeper conversation. But anyway, but I totally agree with Aisling. Like I do love Irish babysitters. Yeah. Like we have a babysitter at the moment, Nessa. I have to give her a call out.
Love her.
Like video over day one. She is the absolute best.
Yeah.
And my husband, like as well, we just instantly liked her.
Yeah.
There's something about, I guess it's like you said, it's just the familiarity.
Yeah.
I find when you meet Irish people, it's like meeting your cousins.
Yes.
Like I moved here in September and I met you, Gemma, at an Irish event like around December.
Yeah.
And I was very homesick when I first arrived, which really surprised me because like I'd never been homesick in my life before. Like I'd lived abroad. I'd never been homesick. Yeah. And I really was. But I remember going to this Irish dinner event and I just felt like I'd sat down at the table of my cousins, even though I'd never met them before. It's just like...
Yeah.
Everyone knows how to say your name properly and it's just good crack.
Yeah.
And it's just easy.
Yeah, I think no, like 100% agree. And I sometimes feel like we can sound very like, like I'm always conscious that I don't want to always just like talk about how brilliant Irish people are, but we are so lucky to have, like when you look at other like cultural groups, that don't have the same amount of their own here, that it's important to lean on the Irish. And that's why I feel like this episode in particular will hopefully be really helpful to hear it straight, like, because I think we don't talk about the struggles enough about, like in general, about working and living abroad away from your family, but especially having kids. And I know from some of my friends who are new moms, they're like, God, I kind of didn't realize how lonely it would be, or I didn't realize how to, like, the Mums in NYC group sounds amazing. Having Irish babysitters, trying to seek that out sounds amazing. Those are things that I think are going to be helpful. And also just I want to quickly ask about the cost of having kids and, how you manage that in terms of like even the cost of babysitters and the cost of the general, there's a cost of living crisis obviously, but like it's more expensive to have kids here than it is probably anywhere else in the world at the minute.
Same.
Yeah. How do you keep, like, I want to ask that, number one, like, how do you kind of put a lid on it if you can, or how do you try to manage that? And also, how do you keep, I feel like when I kind of have a fear whenever hopefully I become a mother down the line that I will lose my identity a little bit. And, how do you stop that happening, or how do you guys both keep sane and positive and motivated and individual in your own identity? So this is a mouthful of a question. So cost and then identity.
Cost is like truly crazy. I don't think you can't almost defend it. It's criminally expensive.
Yeah.
It really is. Babysitting.
Like,
what are you paying for a babysitter?
York, like I'm here 2 years and the prices of everything still shock me.
Yeah.
Still. No.
So if you're paying for a babysitter for a night, like you're going out on a Thursday or Friday night, what are you paying per hour roughly?
$25.
$25 to 30.
To 30, an hour, and then maybe an Uber home.
Yeah.
As well. So like if you want to go to, again, as my mother would say, the pictures, you don't really do anymore because it's too expensive.
It's like $100 to go.
It's an added £100 to go. So like those things.
Or I find if you're out with people that don't have kids and like you go for a drink before, then you have dinner, and then they're like, we go for one or two after, and like you get caught up in it too, and you do, and then you get home and you have to pay the babysitter, and you're like,
oh my God,
oh, that extra drink just like really added up.
Yeah.
They don't realize there's like hundreds of dollars going on to the end of our night out
as well. So true.
Yeah. So you definitely, I think the one thing I will say that we probably do is we go out separately a lot, as you know, and when we hang out that sounds so American. When we go out with friends, we often have people over to ours, which is the one thing I actually am like. I am someone who grew up in a very small house with a lot of chaos, a lot of people in a very small space, so I actually really like having people over, and a lot of folks I think maybe are a bit less comfortable, like it has to be more scheduled and that. So being the kind of drop-in house has been really good for us financially. So like
then you can just make food and not go out for dinner.
I kind of suggest that a lot, and I'd say people are like, is it someone got agoraphobia or something? But I just find it's a lot more affordable to do it that way. But
when you said you go out separately, we didn't even realise. One of our neighbours said to us, it's great that you guys always take the kids separately and you never hang out together. I didn't even notice we were doing it. We were like, oh God, do we even like each other?
Yeah.
It's just when he comes in, I'm like,
sense.
You take them now. Thank you.
Yeah, 100%. You need that for your mind. Yeah.
I wish I could say, I moved to New York with your children and you're going to be going for midnight picnics with your husband. And, seeing another unborn child in his eyes and stuff, but you absolutely will not. Unless you have the trust fund or something.
Yeah.
It is crazy expensive to do things, and even the cost of event, things with children. Is also really expensive. So cost is a big challenge, and that's why people, again, it's so perpetuating then, because you feel like you have to earn more money and plus, and
all the hobbies, and the hobbies start at 3 and everything costs.
And then you end up seeing your kids even
I've
less.
definitely got caught up in it. The activities my kids do include, they do forest school in Central Park.
That's very woke now.
If I was to describe it to you,
what is it?
I love it. And the joke is you have to stay with them, so it's not even a babysitting service that you can get a coffee. I'm basically paying for them a lot of money to play in the mud in Central Park. They go in, they little tin buckets and little trowels, and they dig for worms. And they make mud cakes. All the stuff you should be doing in a backyard. They look for squirrels and rabbits. And
that's cute, though.
Build huts. It's amazing. It's really good.
And you get to chat to the other mums and parents. Yeah. Amazing.
Actually, how much is that?
Okay, I will say how much this is. And this is actually a good value one. For an hour and a half, I think it's 50 for an hour and a half.
For a child.
Yeah.
Okay.
But 50 an hour is the standard, I think.
Yeah.
So anything less than that.
Yeah.
I'm like, good value with the mud making.
We grew up playing in a boreen, so so you're like, that's good value. Jesus.
So, sorry.
And on the identity thing, on the identity question, I think that's a really important question, and I think women judge each other really unfairly, which makes it really hard too, right? But I think becoming a mom and in I guess anywhere in the world, really, you kind of have moments where you do kind of come in and out of who you once were. You know what I mean? And that's just something you have to accept. There are definitely days and weeks and months where you feel a little bit lost and a bit, that your life before you had kids was quite different, and even the connections and things like that you make. I
read recently, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I'm going to say it anyway, that apparently when flamingos have babies, they lose their pink.
And
I just felt that so much. My youngest is 3, and I only feel like I'm kind of coming back to myself now a little bit. You just get you can get so bogged down in it, or I remember I loved maternity leave, and I was in Ireland, so I was off for 11 months, but I remember even at the end of it, just putting clothes on and going back to work and doing your makeup, and you're like, this is so nice. This is what I used to be. So
that's really honest. I really appreciate you saying that. And I think what I want to note, because we are going to have to finish shortly, is what I find really, I've asked you about your identity piece, and I think it's really important to know that everyone's circumstance is different. And right now, Gemma, your circumstance is difficult because you're not getting to go home because of your visa. And as you said, it would grind you and maybe reset you, and you come back with this new lease of life. And, and you're still new relatively to the city as well, with 2 years. And it's so impressive that you're able to come here to this podcast today. Do you know what I mean? And that has to be said. And also, I think we could do a whole separate podcast on where you're both at in your career and in your freelancing with your new Substack, and you with Forbes and the Gemmaverse. And I think those pieces are really important to your identity. And I'd love for you just to tell us a little bit about where you are at in your passion projects at the moment, and are they really important to you to keep who you are before you had kids and who you are now at the forefront?
For me, it's been really important because I started writing in 2020 after I'd lost my mother and had a baby in the same blink, basically. and I think had a bit of postnatal depression, but didn't actually realise it at the time because I didn't really know what was going on. I was just a hot mess.
Yeah.
And like started writing, you know, and really enjoyed it. I always liked to write, and I liked English, and I had comms, and like as a kind of sub part of every job I've ever had and all that. So it was kind of like an outlet for me. I actually started journaling first.
Nice.
Which is nothing like what I write about now, obviously. And then so for me, it kind of gave me like, I don't know, it was cathartic, I guess, a little bit. And then when I went back to work and I started to write a little bit more for NASDAQ and that, it also gave me just like a sense of self-belief.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was also a struggle because I felt very anxious and was worried people would think I was attention whore and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Which I think it's a real Irish thing.
Yeah.
Even right now, like I'm like, oh God,
Yeah.
people think I'm an awful idiot.
Yeah.
You know, it's just part of like being a woman, I think.
Yeah.
Too. But it was just, I think it just gave me, it was something I really enjoyed to do. And I kind of had the opportunity to do it because there was so much time, and you know, well, there was a lot more time back in kind of 2020 days.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just was like, God, I really enjoy this. I feel I do have really strong opinions on things like especially women and equality across the board, like education, like and things like that.
Yeah.
And I God, it sounds so American to say, but like I was like, I do have a voice on these things,
You
so
do.
I'd like to use it.
Yeah.
But still, I struggle a bit. I don't struggle. I actually love the time I spend doing it. I struggle with the perception of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that for me is the toughest part.
The perception of what people think of you.
Yes.
Yeah.
I get that.
I think that's every writer. If you listen to the most famous, successful writer, they say that.
Yeah. And I think it's for anyone putting themselves out there. Yeah. You know, like I used to feel that way about the podcast. I'd be like, everyone probably think. Now, I think the longer you do it, and like that is relatively new in your whole amazing career, but it's I think it'll get easier, definitely.
And like I write a lot at night when the kids are in bed, like I'm a real night owl. So I would often start writing at 8 and I might stay up till 2, and like, you know, then I get up again at 6:30, 7. And it's funny, I'm not as tired like as I would be if I was, I don't know, I think when you're, again, I think in a lot of ways, and this is probably going to drive someone mad to say this, if you do find something you really love to do, you will actually find the time for it. Yeah. You know, people say that as well about sex.
Yeah. Whereas you're writing. Your sex is writing.
Like you're saying you don't have the time for it, you just don't really enjoy it.
Yeah. No, but it's important to know that.
But
because,
you know, it's true, I think. You just find, I don't know.
Yeah. Like if you can find the time to do it, everyone can. That's the truth.
Thanks for writing.
Yeah. Leo might have something to say about that.
At one than the other.
Yeah. And Ash, what about you?
So I started writing also similar timeline to Gemma, kind of out of the blue in 2021. While I was pregnant with my second kid, I started writing about being pregnant and my experience of being pregnant in a pandemic. And I wrote a pregnancy diary that was in the Irish Times, and I really enjoyed that. And then when we came to New York, that just kind of went on the back burner for a while. Yeah. And I've recently started to write again and really enjoy it. And I just love it. I've been just writing about like my adventures of the city and things I do. And I've started this Substack. So it's Notes in New York. It's called on Substack, ashlingmarron.substack.com. And I think I've just found like a really good balance of, because like I'm home with the kids, but I found this amazing, what would you call it? Childcare center. That's like, it's a workplace. So you and it's really flexible in terms of hours. And it's like a really nice place to work. So you have to be on site while they're there, and they're like next door in the next room. So I'm doing that like 2 mornings a week with my 3-year-old. Yeah.
Where is that?
It's on the Upper West Side. It's called Workplace with a Y in the middle, so it's Workplace.
Yeah. That's class.
Yeah, it's on like 68th and Broadway.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing. Like I know so many people, and I found that out, say, from, like, once you like join these groups, you find out so much. Like I definitely found that out through like the Mums in NYC groups, and like people that were in them or like neighbours that were in it.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's just been like an amazing balance for me.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's quite rare. I think it's rare anywhere, but in New York it feels quite European.
Yeah.
You don't have to commit to like the full program. So I'm one of those people that's not taken up. She was offered a free pre-K spot, but just
this works for you.
Yeah, and
love
for
that.
her, because she's a very young 3-year-old.
I got you. Yeah.
And she just wouldn't be ready for that.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, well done.
Yeah.
Well done for finding that. And I cannot wait to get stuck into your Substack, which I thought should be called Notions from New York, but that's okay. But also because I read one of your pieces in the Times about, it was like how you invited a load of people to your kid's birthday.
Oh, yeah.
And it was I was laughing out loud at it. Like, I think.
love Aisling's tweets.
Yeah. So tell us where people can find you online, on social and on anywhere else.
So I'm Aisling Marron on everything. That's AISLING. And yeah.
And
Substack, Twitter, Instagram.
Fabulous. And and the Gemmaverse. Talk to us.
Yesterday.
Love it. Love it.
God. Again, I was like, oh Jesus. I am Gemma Allen. I have a Forbes page and a NASDAQ page, and I am Gemma Allen on LinkedIn and on Instagram. As of yesterday, I am the Gemmaverse.
Love it.
The Gemma under, I don't know.
I'll put it all in the show notes. Ladies, I'm so sad that we have to wrap it up there, but thank you so much for being my guests, and I feel like we should do like a monthly insert from you two on life in New York. But thank you so much for your time and all your honest insights. You've been amazing guests. Thank you so much.
Yay!